Good evening, everybody. My name is Bob Christensen. I'm here with the CMTA for tonight's CMT webinar, Continue Moving Today, Tools to Support You, with Dr. Elizabeth Meisner. And I've had a little bit of a chance to talk with Elizabeth before this, and I think everybody's going to have an enjoyable webinar here this evening. Before we get started, I just wanted to give you a couple of pointers. On the right side of your screen, you'll see a place where you can ask questions. You should see it. It's called Questions. Feel free to pop in any questions that come up during the webinar this evening, and we'll try to answer as many as we can. Hopefully, we'll get to some of them as we go along, and we'll be able to get back to you with responses. And Elizabeth, I'm sure, will be happy to address whatever questions she can here. And with that, I am now going to turn it over to Elizabeth, and off we go. Elizabeth?
Excellent. Thank you so much, Bob, and thank you, everybody, for attending this evening if you're on the East Coast, 8 o'clock our time. So welcome, everybody. And what I'd like to just do is start with a little centering exercise, because if you're at all like me, life has been pretty hectic, and to come into this space, especially a few little technical problems before I logged on. So if we can just take a moment while we're focusing on this picture to just take a deep breath. Just take a deep breath in and a deep breath out. And as you breathe in and breathe out, just let go of all that stuff that's stuck inside of you. Come centered to our presentation tonight. As you continue to breathe, you may place one hand on your heart and one hand on your belly, and just notice as your breath maybe gets deeper, more relaxed, and be aware that at any time, any place, any situation, you can always take care of yourself by taking a deep breath. It can calm you down, get you focused. It helps us let go of yesterday and brings us to right here and right now. And with that, I would love to begin our time together. Over the next 45 minutes, I am going to spend some time telling you my story of being part of a family with CMT-1B, and part of it is my experiences as a professional, a social worker for many, many years, on tools that have helped to support myself and my family, specifically gratitude, mindfulness, and character strength. And then have time for questions. But as Bob said, please feel free to ask questions as I go through. And he will interrupt me if you have something that you want clarified or more information as we go through this presentation. Just a reminder that this is my story and my professional experience, but this is no replacement for people. Most of us, all of us, could probably at some point use mental health counseling. But really specifically, I know with some of these topics on trying to continue to move, especially those days that can be really challenging, sometimes we have thought that we'd be better off dead. And if that is something that you are struggling with, or you know somebody who is struggling with, I've put in the 1-800 number up here that you might want to jot down. It's the National Hotline for Suicide, and they are an excellent support place. So feel free to use that in the future if ever needed. So the reality is that, unfortunately, we do not have a choice with having CMT. Those of you who have it, those of us who love people with it, there's no choice about having Charcot-Marie-Tooth. But what I really believe and what I have been really working on is the choice with dealing with CMT. So life deals us what we have, and then the choice becomes how do we deal with something like CMT. And this is my little bit of who I am. You can see myself, my husband David, and my two sons. The one with the little sticker on his face has CMT-1B. The other son does not, and my husband has had CMT-1B in his family for 4 generations. So I think in a way that has been a blessing because we have grown up with it. It's normal for us, and a lot of family support around it. I myself do not have it, but David and I have been together for many, many years. Since we were 18 years old, we met in high school, and have been together for more years than we've been apart. So even though I myself don't have CMT, I have been exposed to it and deal with it daily over many different situations with my husband and with my son. So the goal for me tonight is to share my own story, and hopefully some of it you will relate to, but also to talk a little bit about some of these tools. And these tools are ones that I have practiced, but they're also based in science. And to me, what's really exciting is there's research behind showing how these tools work. And this comes out of the positive psychology movement. So I just wanted to give you a little bit of a background, just so if you have interest, you can follow up in looking into this more. And you can also understand where it's coming from. I am a social worker by training, and I've been practicing social work, mental health counseling. My area of expertise is with depression and anxiety for about 15 years. And a lot of that time I've really come from what we call strength-based approach. But what's been really exciting to me is over the past 5-7 years, this science of positive psychology has supported everything that I was practicing with my clients. And now there's research that supports the change I was seeing. So the idea in positive psychology is that we don't deny the negative, but we need to balance it. So I'm not saying that we need to look at CMT as being the most incredible thing, and there are no down parts to it, no daily struggles, but we need to balance that. And in order to balance that, positive psychology, especially Dr. Martin Siegelman, pushed to understand human flourishing. And this is really the idea of how, as humans, and especially with a disease of CMT, how do we flourish when we're having to have daily struggles? So part of this is the shift on not focusing on what doesn't work, but to really focus on what is working. And I know in our personal experiences, CMT can lead to a lot of things that don't work. You know, in our house, if you turn off the lights, that causes a lot of trouble. If, you know, you're outside, balance can be an issue, walking across grass. But if we spend all of our time focused on what doesn't work, it'd be pretty hard to get up every morning. And some mornings are more difficult than others. But in a whole, we really try to focus on what is working. And part of that are these 3 tools that we're going to talk about. And the idea of what am I good at and build upon that. And the more we look at and try to focus on what we're good at, the more resilient we become, the stronger we become to deal with those struggles that come with CMT. So for example, with my 10-year-old son, you know, there were many years in the beginning that we didn't necessarily talk about CMT. It was a reality, but we felt he was just too young, so we didn't spend a lot of time educating until probably he hit about, I don't know, maybe about 7. But we'd always talk about differences and how we all have differences. And there were some things that he couldn't do as easily as his brother, but there were other things he could do better. And so we would try to build on those things that he could do better. And part of this we'll get into more detail really on kind of the strength-based approach. The overall well-being is really beneficial through research by gratitude, mindfulness, and strength. So this is really where I'm going to focus this evening. So a quote that I really like, this Elijah Goldstein, is a book that I've read, and at the end you'll have one of my resources, one of his books on depression. And this quote really, to me, kind of sums it up. Gratitude turns what we have into enough. So this idea of kind of right here and right now, what we have is enough. And how do we deal with that, though? How do we come to terms with this? So the idea being affirmations of goodness. And how do we find goodness outside of ourselves? And quite honestly, for all of you with CMT or people you love with CMT, this can be a struggle. This can be a struggle daily. You know, I mean, there are more times than not where it's easier to say, oh, once again, you know, it's not easy to tie up the shoes, or how am I going to take something and put it into that little slot when my fingers don't work, you know, or kind of the idea of the daily struggles, but really trying to shift that into what is going on outside. And there are 3 ways of actually doing this. So the first is the thankful for good. And this is where we're trying to really scan for the good. Unfortunately, our predisposition as humans from our evolution is to scan for the bad. The idea of the fight or flight. As a species, we would not have survived if we weren't scanning for, in our environment, for threats. So we have evolved to live in a safer society most of the time, but we're still scanning for threats. And this can really lead to our stress response, which leads to a lot of illnesses and a lot of undue stress on people. So what we're trying to do is retrain our brain to scan for the good around us. So maybe right now, if you could just take one moment and scan. Is there anything in your vicinity right now that you can be thankful for? I quite honestly am very thankful that my internet is still working. I've had major issues. I teach at the University of Southern California in their virtual MSW program, and last week my computer crashed, everything was crashing. So I spent almost all of yesterday hoping that it would work tonight. So if I can get through this evening, I am very thankful for that, the goodness of the internet. Some things we can kind of take for granted. The next being expressing our thanks. This is the thinking part of it. So when we talk about, when I give the example of, my computer working, I'm then talking about it. So, and then really kind of being able to express it. The last component is feeling it. So really feeling it in our body. So let me give you an example that maybe some of you can relate to. We have quite a hectic morning around here. Typically getting up at 7, everybody has to be out the door by 7:30, and it's typically always quite crazy. I don't know why we can't get into a better routine, but it's just the way it works. So my 8-year-old could get dressed and ready in 5 seconds, do up his shoes. But my 10-year-old with CMT, of course, it takes longer. We have to put on braces, we have to put on the socks, we have to put on the shoes. And this morning, as we had 1 minute left, and I'm getting stressed out, my blood pressure is rising, and I'm, my voice is rising because I'm getting irritated, I just thought for 1 minute, especially because this was really on my mind, this gratitude. And I was really thankful that we were able to spend this time and trying to really feel it in my body. So instead of letting the stress overwhelm me and start to say things that I would regret later, because I've done that, been there, I really took a deep breath, which was that breathing exercise we just did in a minute, and just went 1, 2, 3, and shifted my thoughts to what am I grateful for right now. And I was quite honestly grateful that I had the opportunity to be at home to get them out the door. And within that less than 10 seconds, I was able to feel my body relax, focus for the last 5 minutes, and get everybody out the door without, saying, oh, you're always so slow, all those words that I then regret later. So that's just one example of how I use gratitude to try to buffer when other things are going wrong. So what are the outcomes of gratitude? The amazing things that research shows how this benefits us, it makes me want to practice it more and more. So this is something that I have been cultivating, and we'll talk about how do you cultivate it for quite a while. And for me, it's been very beneficial, and for my family. The first idea is it really reduces anxiety and depression. And we'll talk about this because all of these tools buffer us against anxiety and depression. My way of thinking of anxiety, and what the research shows is anxiety is when we think about the future. So when we think about, what will happen? Will I be able to walk in a couple of years? Will my drop foot get worse? Will I be able to do my profession because my hands are getting weaker? How will this impact me? And depression is when we ruminate about the past. So when we really focus on, what happened in the past. So 2013 for us was a struggle of a year because both my son and my husband had reconstructive foot surgery. For all of you who have been through that, you know that that can be quite challenging. So if I spent a lot of time being depressed about that or being anxious about the future of surgeries, that is exhausting. It's emotionally draining. So the idea of gratitude can buffer us against that. It gives us better sleep, which, we know sleep adds to our increase in mental well-being. So right away, if I'm working with a family or, with children and they're not getting enough sleep, that's one thing that people can change to really help with behavioral intervention. And so it can help us get better sleep. It can also help us against the toxic emotions, and that's the idea of kind of the anxiety and depression. But when we start to lament, you know, if we go to that dark place, which I'm sure we've all been to, of, you know, why does my son have to have a struggle with CMT? Why does every day have to be so challenging? Why can't life be easier? The idea of gratitude gets me back to thinking, you know what? At least he's here. At least he can still walk. And I reframe it into ideas of what I'm grateful for. It also strengthens relationships because we start to look at the people around us from the benefit of being around us versus kind of that idea of the stress that's added. So as you start to learn to scan your environment for things, it really starts to kind of strengthen your relationship with others, strengthens our relationship with our partners, with our children, with people we work with. It increases our life satisfaction, and it helps stronger immune system. So for those of the people who get sick a lot, starting to practice gratitude, the research shows, actually boosts their immune system against getting, you know, colds, illnesses like that. And this is not just me saying this. This is research being done over the past 10 years that supports the idea of gratitude. I was listening to a presentation today on YouTube about a woman that was talking about the benefits of gratitude and anti-aging. And with another birthday approaching very quickly, I love the idea of trying to, you know, go against anti-aging. And she actually was doing research, biological research, which is beyond my understanding, but they were doing blood work. And they were seeing the difference in when people practice gratitude, which is an appreciation for things around them, how it changed their blood composition. So it's pretty fascinating. The idea that it can also lower blood pressure, research has shown that in using gratitude, lower blood pressure, and it increases our dopamine, which is that hormone that's released that makes us feel good. So there's a lot of biology tied into this that, you know, if you really are interested, you can go do a lot more research on. But just in general, these ideas that it's good for us on many different levels, both biologically and psychologically. So it really allows us the celebration of the present moment right now. So what I'd like you to do is to just try a little experiment, and I'm sorry to take you to a bad place, but in order to really feel this experiment, I want you to think about something that makes you either mad or angry, and, you know, bring it to your forefront. If you've just had an argument with something, or if you're struggling with another issue, really think about that issue for a moment. And now I'd like you to shift your thought and think about something that makes you smile. So think about a person that you love. Think about something that you're grateful for. And if you're struggling to think about something you're grateful for, try to think of something that makes you feel good. Even if it's been a long time that you have felt good, try to have a memory that makes you feel a place of gratitude and appreciation. And the goal being that we can't have both of those thoughts at the same time. We can't have those toxic emotions and have a feeling of gratitude. And so the more we practice this, the more we can see that when we are feeling yucky or feeling miserable, you know, when I start to lament about, you know, the pitfalls of CMT, when I start to think about, you know, why us, when I start to think about, you know, how it's not fair, when I start to think about different things like that, I need to catch myself and I need to bring in things that I'm grateful for. I am grateful for what CMT has offered us, a community. When we became part of the CMTA, I never knew we had such a strong community. The CMTA, you know, parent website, I get so much support from reading other people who are struggling, other people who are trying their best day by day. So that's where my gratitude can come around. So how do we practice this? Part of it is awareness. When I first started many years ago with gratitude, because this is something I've been doing for a while, not so much the mindfulness or character strength, I really had to practice it. So consciously, I would set once or twice a day where a little alarm would go off and I'd say, okay, just stop right now and scan something that I'm grateful for. And now it is a way of being. So some people will find it almost nauseating how much I can be grateful for. You know, right now I have my window open and I can hear the wind blowing out there, and it's beautiful. You know, you just kind of hear it rustling through the trees. Right now I'm very grateful. My office in my house is near my children's bedroom, so I'm very grateful that they're being quiet so you can't hear them in the background. So now I really start to scan and naturally see the things that are positive in the day. So we can do this by, first of all, really pushing ourselves, and then we can do it in different ways, like writing gratitude letters, Post-it notes, or just expressing it for people. So you'll need to figure out what works for you, and with any of these tools that we're talking about tonight, one might feel better for you. You know, gratitude might just be too challenging, and if it is, you might find mindfulness works better for you, or the character strength language. So it's small building steps. You know, it's like with our son with his CMT, we know he needs to stretch every day. Ideally, you know, half an hour a day, but it's small steps. I'm happy if I get 5 minutes. And every day we focus on the 5 minutes. You know, it's those small little steps versus we need an hour of stretching every day. So here's an example of gratitude. My two sons, we try to do biking in the summer and being aware and thankful of the good things that happen. The VIA character we'll talk about in a few minutes. The website I have up there was the one that if you wanted to, you could go and fill out your own character strength sheet, and that is how they define gratitude, being aware and thankful of good things that happen. So really here, the simplicity of enjoying an ice cream cone after a bike ride. You can see the smile, you can see the gratitude on their face. So a lot of gratitude is being grounded in the here and now. It's not thinking about the future or worrying about the future or being upset about the past. It's really kind of right here and right now. I was sent a question ahead of the presentation, and I'm not sure you know, if other people have questions as they go, but it was about a 12-year-old boy who was just diagnosed a couple months ago with CMT type 4C. And I don't know much about 4C. I only kind of know about the 1B that our family has. But the idea that the parents talked a lot about how he's extremely tenacious and a persistent young man whose independence is extremely important to him. To me, when we're talking about the gratitude, it's those characteristics that this parent picked out that we want to focus on. So being aware and thankful for those things and building upon it. The next part of the email kind of and question went on to talk about the hard parts, you know, that the child is struggling around the diagnosis of CMT, the anger, and kind of maybe the social isolation. And when we come from this approach, it really is building up even more the positive strength, so the tenaciousness, independence, and when those things happen, to be grateful and to reflect them into the child. So we'll talk a little bit more about that question, but just hopefully that's kind of an example of how we can use gratitude. The next tool that really I started to cultivate after my husband's surgery in 2013 is mindfulness, because this is really paying attention in a particular way on purpose in the present moment. This, to me, was the real buffer about my increase in anxiety around my son's surgery. When he had both of his feet reconstructed, we had the first set of surgery on, I think it was like a December 3rd, and then the second set of surgery on December 17th, and there was almost no way I thought I could make it through those 2 weeks by myself. So I knew I needed tools to be able to get there and to be able to move through it in a way that would support him. And that's where mindfulness really helped me, because all I had to worry about was the present moment. And that is really what got me through. So mindfulness is a simple process of actively noticing new things. So if you could just take a moment and reflect on this picture. And part of practicing mindfulness is really just focusing without judgment. And as you're focusing on this picture, just be aware of, do your thoughts wander? Have I already lost you? You know, are you onto your to-do list for tomorrow? Am I not answering your question? And if your mind wanders, just bring it back. Just bring it back to this photo. Notice the rainbows. Notice 2 of the rainbows. And it was funny, last night I was going over this presentation with my husband and kind of talking about this picture, and we were, you know, talking about looking at the barn. Do you notice the barn down in the left-hand corner? And his question to me was, do you recognize the barn? And I'm like, no, not at all. Well, it actually is the barn from the farm that I grew up on in Ontario, Canada. So talk about mindfulness. Even after I had looked at this photo many times, I had not been mindful of that barn. And as soon as he said that, that really made me aware that I wasn't really paying attention. I had just seen it as a barn, and I was so caught up in the beauty of the rainbow. So mindfulness, you know, always kind of be practiced. So just look at the picture, be aware of any thoughts or feelings that it stirs for you, you know, and that's kind of mindfulness, just paying attention in a particular place on purpose. The benefits of mindfulness is that by focusing on the here and now, we're less likely to get caught up about the worries of the future or regrets over the past. And so in those 2 weeks between surgeries, I had incredible potential for anxiety about the future. I mean, for all of you who've been through surgery, you know the stress, you know the no guarantee, you know, no idea what's going to happen. But especially with our children, we need to be the strong ones in front of them. So I really had to really focus on the here and now, knowing that I would just have to deal with whatever came in the future. Also, mindfulness buffers us against depression and lamenting over the past. So now that the surgery has come and gone for both of them, you know, both have done really well. The one foot maybe not as good as we had liked, we did some less aggressive things. And instead of regrets over that, I need to really be kind of present on how much better we are now. No pain, still able to walk, you know, still his feelings around surgery is good. So this idea that mindfulness also improves our overall health. And this is also found in the research. So if you want more information on this, there's a lot more out there that you can read on specifically how it benefits us. So mindfulness is the ability to cultivate awareness of the present moment while putting aside our lens of judgment. It's that connection to the immediate experience. So this is Ethan, who does Taekwondo. We are fortunate enough to find an activity with an instructor that really built his confidence. And going back to that question that the mother had about social isolation due to decline in participation, I think most of us can see that in our children as they hit that 10 to 15 years old, when they start to realize there's something different about them. But the research shows that social support is so important. So it's really that idea of finding one connection for each person, and even as adults, as to what can they do and supporting that. So here Ethan has an instructor who, you know, when it came to doing the form, obviously that was a little challenging because of the balance, but his instructor recommended doing a form with a weapon, and that was able to really help him kind of compensate for his balance. So you can see the smile as he just got his award. So this is something that boosters him instead of brings him down. There are many activities that we tried that he did not see smiles, and as a parent, you know, we made the decision to consciously pull him out because he was young enough. So I think that's part of the struggle of moving forward. So now, after talking about gratitude and mindfulness, I just want to start to touch base on these character strengths. This language around character strengths changed my life and changed how I work with my clients, because it gives us words to describe people, what they do well. And so here's an example of zest. You can see Ethan as he's jumping off that swing with his braces that he is feeling alive. I myself was not too happy, but you know, at some points we have to let go and have to give our kids a little space and allow them to feel alive. So this poem here, Grounded Lessons, really hits home, and I think is beautiful. By any of you who have heard of Maddie Spankin, he was a poet. He wrote this at age 11, And he passed away at a young age. He had a form, I think, of muscular dystrophy. And so when you look at where he succeeded in his 11 years, 14 years, I think he wrote like 4 books of poems. To me, it shows that even if we can't move, he was in a wheelchair bound, lost 2 of his siblings to the same disease, he accomplished so much. And his poem to me is just so poignant when you think about his struggles and how he saw the best in life. He said, life is a treasure. People should enjoy it, even if digging to it or through it is a challenge. And for him, it was a challenge, and for a lot of us, it's a challenge. Every day can handle us different challenges. And through these tools, I have found, and research has shown, that they can make that challenge a little less overwhelming. To me, these character strengths are so powerful because they're what's best in you. I think of, I love the word tenacious, and I think of my son who is tenacious too. There is nothing that once he puts his mind to that he won't do. And to me, I almost feel like that's a character strength of CMT, because things could be so challenging that when I've met people with CMT and my whole husband's family, when they put their mind to it, whatever it is, it could be whatever, there's no stopping them. They keep going. And these idea of character strengths are wellsprings. So we continue to build upon them. So this is a language of goodness. And if we can adapt it and think of looking at the people around us and ourselves from this language of goodness, it can really kind of empower all of us. So just a little bit about this. It was developed in 2000 out of a whole group of research. This is a cross-culture, and there are these themes, 24 of them, that are for a flourishing life. And this goes back to what we talked about. Positive psychology is about how do we flourish in life, and how do we flourish in life with struggles. So this is the idea of focusing on what is the best in us. So it goes back to the idea of, you know, one of the words is bravery. You don't shrink from fear. You have valor. And I think of Ethan and my husband, David, as incredibly brave people. You know, when I think of just this morning when I gave you that example of, you know, me starting to get frustrated with Ethan with, once again, I thought, you know what, the fact every morning that you have to do this, you know, that is brave. This takes a lot of perseverance, a lot of kind of, you know, every day to get up and go. And so when we start to look at what's best in us, we can use those as a springboard instead of, you know, looking at what doesn't work. So the idea, if any of you did this character strength assessment, and they have it for children too and teenagers. So the mother who wrote into me, if you're on here, or the parent with the 12-year-old, I would highly recommend to have your son fill out this character strength, because it really helps us to define who we are. I have my Master's of Social Work students fill it out in their first semester, and the words back are, you know, I had never seen myself that way. I had never seen myself as having a lot of hope, that I was really optimistic. I had never seen myself as full of zest. So a lot of the times we don't even see ourselves this way. But if you look at the reports that you can get for free once you sign up, the lower ones, a lot of people see that as their deficits. And they are not deficits. This is where we need to do a paradigm shift. They're just maybe character strengths that we don't use a lot. So the idea of using these can buffer us against problems. So for example, my sister had a dear friend who passed away a couple months ago, and she used the character strength of humor. She knew in order to get through something that was so challenging and overcoming to us, she had to laugh. And so every night for a month, she would watch a comedy show for half an hour before she went to bed, and she was sleeping better, which helped her heal better, and it left her feeling good. So that's one small way that as we struggle through the day, if you're in a place where you feel you can't get out, sometimes we need outside sources like watching a comedy, watching a funny movie that can help us slowly change our kind of chemistry in our body. So the outcome, the research shows, it is linked to increased well-being. It lowers our perceived stress, and it gives us vitality. So here you can see, I'm not sure if you see David, but here he was with his cast after his surgery in his wheelchair, and he was still outside playing basketball. So the idea that, you know, one of his top is pervasiveness, that he doesn't stop, even in a wheelchair, where I think quite honestly after surgery I probably would have taken a month off just to have a rest. Within 4 days he was up bouncing around because that's who he was. So how do we cultivate this? The first thing is by awareness. The idea of really looking at the people around us and really starting to look at their strengths. What are they doing well? So another example, my 8-year-old has the most persistent, you know, temperament, that once he gets on something, he will never stop. And so sometimes this could be really struggling, but when you reframe it as a strength, it helps me to see it as an attribute and kind of how he can use it every day in a way to help build himself up and to build us as a family, so instead of butting heads. The other idea, though, is that overuse of our strengths can be where we sometimes struggle with. So if you are somebody who really values love, both being loved and, you know, wanting to be loved, and let's say you have a child with CMT and all you want is for their happiness, and you put their happiness first and they're not happy, they're struggling, they're angry, they're feeling lots of emotions, that can be emotionally draining for you too. When, you know, Ethan has his moments of not being happy, saying CMT sucks, I have to kind of step back and support him in that, but not get consumed in it, because that's not my role at that point. I can go to my room and at other times talk about, you know, how challenging CMT is, but when he's in that moment, really it's supporting that and then helping him kind of move through that. And what I have found, a lot of that is just being present with him, that mindfulness idea, going back to just being able to sit in the same room with his anger or his tears, or, you know, when Dave will, the change of seasons, I don't know about for a lot of you, but the change of seasons around here is really hard, going from cold to hot. There's a lot of reflections from David and Ethan on their fingers, you know, feeling hard, having a hard time, wondering if they're losing more sensation. So the idea of how do we buffer against these is, you know, applying character strengths. Gratitude is a character strength. One of my top ones, and also appreciation of beauty, which is probably why I look at CMT as a blessing and not a curse, because two people that I love the most in my life, I feel are who they are because of their struggles with CMT and how they have framed themselves to be the most compassionate people towards other people. The other idea is creativity. What I have experienced with people with CMT is you are the most creative group of people. You know, there is nothing that can stand in your way with solutions. So to me, that's a strength. Is it annoying that you have to be creative? Yes, but most people are. You know, when you get to a place and you have to put a quarter in the slot of the parking meter, where's the creativity around that? The idea of love, this is a character strength. How do we show love? By, you know, sharing something from yourself. We first need to love ourselves in order to be strong for the people around us. But we can buy a flower, simple as that, or sharing a smile. This is the overall view of the character strength. So you can see all of the labels in here and start to spot them in yourself. This gives a language of how we can talk with our children or our partners about, you know, I appreciate your honesty when you talk about how hard CMT is. You know, that authenticity and integrity, you know. So this is just to give you an overview. You can get this from the VIA website. So here's just an example of the character strength, perseverance, and honesty. I'll try pressing play and see if this works. This was I'll play it and then I'll explain it. I don't know, actually, you probably won't be able to hear it because it's not through my phone. So I won't be able to play it, but this actually doesn't want to work either. So this was going to be the video of Ethan's first steps. after he had his cast off and was walking, and he was exhausted but very proud of himself. And the honesty part comes in when his brother says, "But your feet still aren't flat." And in such a beautiful way, no judgment. It was just very matter of fact that, you know, we thought the surgery was going to have your feet flat, and they weren't. And, you know, we just all kind of dealt with it because they aren't flat. Most CMT feet aren't flat. They have those lovely high arches and, you know, hammered toes. So as our time is wrapping up, I just want to end with the idea in the choices in how we deal with CMT. So in our house, unfortunately, they hear it over and over again. You don't have a choice about having this, but you have a choice on how you want to deal with this. If you want this to rule your life, CMT, you can let it. If you don't want to, here are some things you can do around it. You know, you could be grateful for some of these things. We can, you know, come from different approaches. There is no way of knowing about the future. I know in our family, CMT-1B, there are different presentations and different, you know, expressions. I know in our family, the CMT-1B, we've seen a lot of scoliosis. So we are constantly, every 6 months, having Ethan checked to make sure he doesn't have a curvature of the spine, because David had to have surgery as a 14-year-old to have a rod in his back. So just an added layer on top of surgeries he already had. The idea that really there is a present in this present moment, and that's what positive psychology and Buddha, this has been around for a long time, teaches us. This present moment is our present. And so this buffers us from the past, thinking about depression, and the future of anxiety. So I would encourage you to think, what are the good things about having CMT? Instead of thinking about all the drawbacks and the challenges, start to think about what are the benefits, being part of this community, you know, learning about yourself, you know, sharing with other people, empowering other people. And be also, who in your life are you grateful for and why, and share it with them. So as you know, you have people around you who are supporting you, share that with them. You know, say thank you, reflect. But if there's nothing out of these things that resonates with you, or you don't even feel you have the energy to do, a simple smile 4 times a day can cultivate mindfulness and gratitude and will benefit those around you. So starting as small as setting your timer 4 times a day to smile will have a biological change on you. So to wrap up, here are some books. I really like The Uncovering Happiness. It's excellent. The Whole Brainchild for Dealing with Children. Anxiety Free, another really good book. So these are just some of the books that I have on my shelf that I would highly recommend checking out from the library to kind of add to your repertoire of learning. And in summary, this is kind of our family and just our story, and I really appreciate you being present for listening to me as I talked. And Bob, I don't know if there are any questions, but we'll open up the floor if there are any questions.
Yeah, I don't have any questions here right now, Elizabeth, but I would like to say thank you very much for the presentation. It was great, and I hope everybody got a lot out of it. And let me just give people a few moments to send in some questions here. In fact, we just got one in, and someone is questioning about, she has a young daughter that started talking to her about her CMT, and her question was, will it affect my brain? And the mom was grateful that she could reply no. And she got on to think about her ability to think, even if her steps were challenged. And it's a really nice comment there, I think.
Yeah, that's beautiful. And that's a really great example of, you know, mindfulness, being in the moment, but also that gratitude, right? That even if your legs are getting weaker, your brain is getting stronger. And it has to, because you're dealing with extra things. So to me, that's one of the benefits, you know, as you struggle physically, mentally you have to get stronger, and we want you to get stronger. I think that's a really great example. Going back, I think I didn't do enough to answer the question that we had ahead of time, you know, the parent asking on ways to help and, you know, following the difficult time of diagnosis. And I think this is when I read this question, you know, I can relate because it's very challenging. Unfortunately, I wish there was an easy word like just do this and everything would be better. I have not found that. You know, if anybody else has, please share, because I think that's really important. What I have found is really important to me is separating my emotional response from my son's and my husband's, because mine is very different than theirs, and that to me is the mindfulness. You know, when Ethan is struggling around wearing his braces, there's a component of it that to me as a mother is very challenging, but that's not where his struggle is. You know, there's a different level of struggle for him. So I have to be really aware of what am I struggling with and what is he. And this became really apparent when we went through the surgery. I had a really hard time. I mean, it took me a year to even come to terms that we needed surgery. And when we presented it to him, he's like, okay, yeah, no problem. And so he never had anxiety about it. And I had to work really hard for him not to have that anxiety because it was my anxiety. So this idea of, I think this mother really talked about social isolation. And I think that's the one key thing of trying to connect our children or ourselves with something we can do. And it might not be the basketball team, it might not be the soccer team, but can it be photography? Can it be, you know, a singing group? Can it be a bridge group? And I think we only need one community, but we need that community to help us not feel isolated. When it comes to dealing with people's anger and, you know, maybe wanting to ignore or not deal with the CMT, I think that's people's way of coping, and we need to respect that as long as we can help them see it's a choice. You know, you can make the choice to be angry about CMT, but the CMT is not going away. So eventually you might want to work through the anger. So I think really focusing on people's strengths to help them get over it is what I have found has worked best with my son, especially when we've had struggles at school, you know, with teachers, or I had a teacher who said, well, is this because he has CMT that he's acting this way in class? And I said, well, you know what, he has CMT, but his behavior in class is not acceptable, so we need to deal with that. I'll deal with the CMT part independently. And so we came up with a specific intervention based on the strength-based approach around the struggles he was having in class, and the problem dissipated. So any other questions?
That seems to be it for now, Elizabeth.
Okay.
So I guess with
Excellent.
that, we should probably wrap it up and say thank you, everybody, for joining. And we hope to see you next month for the next CMTA webinar.
Excellent. Thank you so much for all coming. And if anybody has any questions, feel free to email me, or if you want any more information. So thank you, everybody.